go underground as deep as you can go. The air is cool and the earth is damp, and when you close your eyes, you are reminded of the dead. Remember where that is? You'll find your way from there.
At several points while playing through Kentucky Route Zero, chills overtook my body. Stunned in the face of its rich sound design, heart-wrenching story arc, and deeply human characters, I wondered why so few games go this far. Never has a game pulled me in so deep. I picked up on this low moan, rumbling everything around me, permeating every interaction, every item description, and I resolved to follow it to its source. By the time I'd found it, I was convinced. This is the best game I've ever played. Which is kind of funny to say, because at times Kentucky Route Zero barely feels like a game at all. It has more in common with a play or a series of misconveyed rumors. So many conventions we expect from games are missing. Where most narrative games have you inhabit an empowered protagonist, Kentucky Route Zero's cast are powerless outcasts, unable to shape their own lives, much less the broader world. It pits you against these gargantuan, faceless problems that you don't have any hope of solving. At times it's disorienting, at others so bleak it's hard to carry on. None of this is done to discourage the player, but instead to challenge them in a way games rarely do. Can you find joy in this place that has stolen your agency? Can you find a home in this place built to tear communities apart? Can you find meaning in a place where truth barely exists? Kentucky Route Zero asks a lot of its players, but offers so much in return, so many new questions and ideas. Some of my favorite moments with the game were spent weeks after putting it down, trying to piece together the narrative in my head. While I think I found some answers, I'm not going to solve the game's mysteries in this video. For reasons I'll get into, I think that's impossible. At a couple points, I'll get into major plot events that I think people should see for themselves, and before doing that, I'll give a heads up in case anyone wants to skip ahead. Without further ado, these lights are very warm. Let's get into it. Two playthroughs and dozens of hours deep, there's still a lot I couldn't tell you about this game. I don't understand, for instance, the Museum of Houses, the D&D players, Xanadu, the giant bird, or, you know what, instead of diving right into that, let's start with what I know for sure. Kentucky Route Zero is a point-and-click adventure game by indie developers Cardboard Computer. It was released episodically between 2013 and 2020 in 5 acts. The game begins on a quiet strip of highway in southern Kentucky. The region is effectively run by a giant conglomerate known as the Consolidated Power Company, which has bought up all the mines, land, and infrastructure it could get its hands on. The people here struggle to gain a foothold under this monopoly, including you, the player character, a man named Conway. Conway is a delivery driver for an antique shop, and when the story begins, he's making one last delivery before the shop closes down for good. The destination, 5 Dogwood Drive, an address unfamiliar to him, which can only be accessed via the little-known Route Zero, an underground highway with no fixed beginning, end, or entry point. In his search for Dogwood Drive, Conway joins forces with a diverse cast of characters, among them Ezra, a young boy looking for his parents, and Shannon, a TV repairwoman who's told to come along in a dream. The troupe, including as few as 2 or as many as 8 people at a time, goes off on tangent after tangent while making the delivery. They perform a haunting ballad at a dive bar, shuffle through archives in an office building full of bears, and stop at a whiskey distillery where Conway... A playthrough of this game takes about 10 hours, but beyond that, I'm not sure how much more I can tell you. I could go on about these tangents, but there's not much I can say for sure about the core plot. I can't even really tell you whether Conway makes the delivery in the end. I can tell you what I think happened, but there's no guarantee I'm right. In making your way through this world, you come to understand that objectivity takes a back seat here, with even basic facts up for interpretation. Often truth is obscured by a thick layer of poetic fog. With the world described so abstractly, it's impossible to tell fact from metaphor from tall tale. At first, I thought this writing style was just for atmosphere, a stylistic choice to draw the player in. And while it certainly does do that, the abstraction isn't just a storytelling device, it's an innate property of this world. In Act 1, I got pulled into a bait shop, where Conway's interest was piqued by a fish tank that seemed to be shimmering.
Conway reaches into the third tank, The water seems to tremble with life. Conway can't tell if his hand is being nibbled by fish or massaged by the artificial current. As his eyes near the surface of the water, he can see something colourful glowing faintly at the bottom of the tank. Conway reaches deeper into the tank. A tremor spreads from his elbow out to his fingertips and up to the base of his shoulder. His vision flickers. The water is running warm under his skin now, and he has the sensation that something is about to snap. His eyes close. The cashier pushes Conway roughly on the shoulder. He's been talking, yelling maybe, but it's all an echo now. Conway looks up, his neck stiff with pain, his right palm still tingling. The cashier points to the tank, then above it to a few holes torn in the wall, nail holes from which an electric sign has come dislodged and fallen into the water. He helps Conway to his feet, looks at him pitifully, and returns to the cash register.
It makes sense that I, the player, would choose to reach into the tank. There's no way I could have known. But Conway was right there. He stood right in front of the tank, saw it sparking and humming with life, and just didn't notice. It's like he read the same vague item description I had. Here, maybe 20 minutes into the game, I realized this world is just as inscrutable to its inhabitants as it is to me. They too see it through this haze, never fully cognizant of its rules. They wear their confusion on their sleeves, too, seeking answers from anyone who might have them. Much of our time in the game is spent asking strangers what exactly is going on. In the very first conversation between Shannon and Conway, Shannon's first words to him are, "Do you believe in ghosts?" And then, "What about a person? Can a person be haunted?" And taking it all in, it's no wonder they have questions. This is the game of underground seaways looping in impossible directions, of books predicting the future. Destinations along the Zero will only appear if you perform a complex series of twists and turns, as if conjuring them from a spell. On the player's end, the timeline is especially confusing. The setting has some characteristics of the 1980s and some of the present day, but also they're cyborgs. We seem to find ourselves caught between past and future in some pocket moment that's distinctly not the present. The order of events in a playthrough seems to expressly contradict itself too, with individual scenes occurring days or years out of place, and events at the beginning of the game seeming to occur after the end. It's hard to create one account of events, and that's the point. It puts us in Conway's shoes as he struggles to put his life story in a logical order. Repeatedly, and in the middle of conversations, he blacks out. The world around him fades, and he regresses to moments long gone.
He lays on a rooftop, new shingles rough beneath his back, swirling in the noon sun. He's exhausted. They must have started before dawn. His legs are sore from holding stable on the uneven surface, his wrists from breaking old sealant, his fingers from carefully lifting shingles to hammer down new ones.
You can tell the past weighs heavy on these characters. They're racked with regret about the people and places they've been forced to leave behind and unable to find closure. This world is a harsh one, its impermanence abundantly clear. Any second work could dry up or you could get sick and you have to move on to the next thing. So the gang keeps moving, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. That's barely acknowledged in the story. Nearly all of our characters are homeless. All they have is what they carry with them. A notepad, a change of clothes maybe, not much else. Certainly nothing like pictures that could tether them to the past, prove continuity of their being. If I was so transient, I'd be attached to my memories too. It's all they have to show for the lives they've lived. What is there to do but remember? But in trying to make sense of this world, memory alone doesn't suffice. Everyone here seems to be losing their grip on the past. Stories have holes in them or contradict one another. Lizette, Conway's longtime employer at the antique shop, seems to suffer from dementia. On the morning of the shop's last delivery, she recounts stories from her better days over breakfast, but the details are foggy. The player, as Conway, must fill in the blanks, offering up words when she trails off.
I remember your lessons. He just wanted to study his... what was it called?
Astronomy.
That's it. How could I forget?
It wasn't his fault.
It wasn't anyone's fault, Conway. That's what we mean when we say it's a
tragedy.
Sure.
The thing is, we weren't there for the moments she's recalling. This is pure guesswork. At some points, I felt like I might have been outright lying to her. With most of these prompts, she goes along with your suggestions no matter which option you pick because she trusts you. I wonder how much it matters whether you jump in with facts or fiction. I wonder how much that distinction even exists once a person's faculties begin to go. As many people have, I've witnessed my loved ones decline over the years due to Alzheimer's. My great-grandmother, in particular, a wonderful woman with a fascinating life. She just turned 96 this year. When I go visit her, we sit and drink our tea. She tells me about moving to Canada, World War II, this one awful landlord she had years back. Mostly it's the same 4 or 5 stories over and over. She's grown foggier with time. Every successive retelling has a couple more mistakes, a couple more pieces missing when she can finish it at all. But I don't mind. This ritual now isn't about recounting events exactly as they happened, but relishing the act itself of remembering. Remembering is a comfort even when you can't do it right, because it tethers you to this world. Sitting together, reliving those moments in her life, lets us connect with each other even when she can't remember who I am. Memories may not be correct all of the time, but if we carry them with us and live according to them, aren't they still real in their own way? Kentucky Route Zero upholds this kind of truth too. A couple times you hear the same story told from 2 different perspectives and the facts don't line up. This isn't something to set straight or anything. People carry their understandings of the past with them and it shapes who they become. Memory isn't meant to be perfectly objective, and the way a moment lives on in our minds is just as real as the moment itself. Some plot elements inhabit several mutually exclusive points at once. The second character most players talk to is Weaver Marquez, a mathematician, hacker, and all-around Enjima. Apart from Conway, nobody has seen Weaver in months, and many think she's dead. At points I was sure she was. The evidence suggested she had dropped off the edge of the earth some time ago, appearing only in hallucinations and dreams. At other points, though, I was certain she was alive and that I had met her. Surely both of these things can't be true, but the evidence is there to support either conclusion. No matter what you think, the text backs it up in some ways and contradicts it in others. Much of the world is in superposition until you decide what you want to be true. Weaver Marquez is alive and well, and she's missing, and she's dead. Choose whichever option resonates with you and run with it. When games present us with mysteries, we expect to work through them in the narrative and see them tied up nicely. Rarely does a game expect you to keep asking questions after you've put the thing down. This open-endedness doesn't sit well with some players, and I get it. Many people waited 7 years for the game to conclude in 2020, only to find their biggest questions unanswered. And I can see how that would be frustrating, but I think leaving some things ambiguous was a deeply generous choice, because it gives players the chance to create their own internal canons, choosing whichever answers satisfy them most. This world is equal parts vast and intricate. If you want to find answers, you have to pay close attention or you might miss a vital detail. And it's also transient, too. Picking one scene or dialogue option can mean foregoing the other, missing out on information you might really want. It does wonders for immersion, inviting you to get up close. Note the flickering of lights, the chirping of crickets, the gentle wake coming off houseboats. Read inconsequential item descriptions as parables, because they might as well be. I was blown away at how many connections I found when I gave the game my undivided attention. You might be tempted to go over these 5 acts with a fine-tooth comb and announce you've cracked the code. You figured out every facet of this world and its timeline. You did it, game solved. But I think that's a stale way to analyze a story, and doing so here means working against the themes on display. As the devs have said, they didn't design puzzles, they designed mysteries. This game isn't about getting answers, it's about wandering around unsure. To immerse yourself in this world, you must surrender to unknowing, find purpose in the act of questioning itself, independent of whatever answers you might find. Hold nothing to the standard of objective truth. If such a thing even exists, it's scarce here. Most of my questions were never answered in the text, but I almost prefer it that way. It's given me the chance to turn them over in my head, filtering them through my own imperfect memory and my own subjective experience. It feels fitting for a game like this. These are the uncertainties that make Kentucky Route Zero an adventure game, and they're barely even in the game. They largely exist in the player's head, days and weeks after putting the controller down. It's no wonder a vibrant fan community persists, one that's still making discoveries about the game to this day. This thing was built to be developed on, speculated about. That's when it's at its best. Although distinctly not to be solved. The truths you uncover along the Zero aren't universal, they're yours. Most commercial games have you play as a hero, if not to the world, at least in their own story. Someone capable of meaningfully changing their environment. We accompany that hero as they strive and grow and usually accomplish their goals. This is a solid arc to design a game around. It's no wonder it's become ubiquitous. When I get home from a long day of video essaying, I guess, and pick up a controller, I want it to empower me. I want to pilot a mech, save the princess. I want to really feel like Spider-Man. I'm sorry, I want to burn through all the cliches on my first go at game writing. We expect this from games, that once we get good, we'll be able to live out a power fantasy. In contrast, it's not really possible to be good at Kentucky Route Zero. There are no skill checks, no difficulty curves. The best way to play is actually the least efficient, giving this thing the utmost patience, learning all there is to learn about this world and its problems. And you should do that, but it won't net you any extrinsic reward. There's nothing stopping you from blasting through. Hell, speedrun the thing, as one guy inexplicably has, not reading a single word of text. Regardless of your actions, your characters wind up in the same place by the end of Act 5. No matter what, it ends in a funeral. The game is over, but to say you've beaten it would be laughable. Cardboard Computer really went against the grain here, challenging what we expect from games with some really smart creative choices. One I haven't seen talked about much is the employment of a cyclical 5-act story structure. The choice to call attention to the game's act structure is itself pretty unconventional for games. We don't usually think of games as having acts, especially as we trend towards big open worlds and non-linear experiences. But Kentucky Route Zero was released episodically, and each episode is broken into scenes with these big, bold title cards. It's evocative of theater more than anything. It reminds us that the direction of this story is predetermined. Do whatever you like, the next scene will come either way. Ultimately, we're just here to watch the plot unfold. Some people don't like this very much, but we'll get to that. With that in mind, I want to contrast this game's structure with the vastly more common 3-act structure. For those unfamiliar, I'm going to give a brief rundown of what 3-act story structure looks like. Note that I'm speaking in very broad strokes here, and I'm not especially qualified to explain this, or anything I talk about on this channel for that matter. I think you guys think I'm smart because I know how to edit video and use thesaurus.com. Anyway, in Act 1 we meet our protagonist or protagonists. We get acquainted with their world and learn its rules. An inciting incident creates some tension the protagonist must try to resolve. Act 2, our protagonist struggles to resolve the conflict but can't because they need to grow first. So they learn and they grow. Act 3, tension builds as our protagonist continues to struggle and usually they succeed. 3-act structure lends itself really well to individualist stories with a clear beginning and end to a narrative tension. But in a post-apocalyptic setting, it can really run up against its limits. First, there isn't a conceivable antagonist. Everyone we meet is victimized by capitalism, a force so massive it goes unacknowledged. Its clearest manifestation is just as faceless, the generically titled Consolidated Power Company. We see its impact everywhere, but we never meet any employees or get a sense of what they actually do. So if you want to fight this evil, where would you even start? Second, and most importantly, the notion of empowered protagonists doesn't really work here. Our characters have been deeply damaged by this world. They're facing debt, addiction, and homelessness, problems you can't solve with grit alone. If the game let us circumvent these deep systemic issues, it would be a slap in the face to the real people who struggle like this as jobs get outsourced and labor rights slashed. Individuals can't always solve these problems, that's why they're so pervasive. Forces too large to confront or even conceive make it nearly impossible. You could almost say that this is the Dark Souls of point-and-click games. Please don't click away. I worked so hard on this. Kentucky Route Zero not only de-emphasizes the protagonist, it barely believes in such a thing. While we begin our adventure as Conway and get attached to his mission to Dogwood Drive, he doesn't remain the focus. In my playthroughs, the last time I played as him was at the end of Act 3, 2 full acts and 3 interludes before the game ends. By Act 5, you're playing as a whole community, at least half a dozen people plus one very sweet little cat. You're shifting between their perspectives often, following their individual arcs alongside the broader mission. I'm gonna have to drop a pretty major spoiler here, so skip to the timestamp on screen if you like to skip it. Alright, Conway doesn't make it to the end. After sinking deep into debt, he's taken away by distillery workers to begin working it down. In most stories, this would be the end point, the mission we're on seeming to have failed. But by the time Conway departs, the delivery has become so much bigger than him. The community formed around the trip has become a living entity itself with its own needs bigger than any one member. So the rest of the gang carries on, finding Dogwood Drive and making the delivery, because that's what's best for the community. Having a set goal offers them rare stability, and completing the delivery is a way to carry their friend into the present. With capitalism tearing families and towns to shreds, we owe this to each other, to build things that extend past the bounds of our flimsy bodies, that stand a chance at outlasting us. The game is less about any one person and more about the struggle to maintain bonds and keep communal goals alive. Things can go on without any one of us. No one person shakes the world all that much, but collectively we matter a whole lot. Some people have interpreted the plot's fatalism as your choices not mattering, but that doesn't sit right with me. You can make choices in this game, though they're not world-shaking. You can name your dog or stop to make small talk with strangers. When you hurt your leg, you can choose between I can walk but it's slow and I can walk but it's painful. They're closer to the choices we make in our daily lives. And I like playing as characters who I can relate to in a real, immediate way, not just admire from afar. Characters who share my petty frustrations, my yearning for stability. They aren't the masters of their destiny, but shit, is that the bar for a good character? Games can be powerful vessels for empathy. This one offered me perspectives I'd never encountered in a game before, and it was deeply enriching. I worried that in restricting ourselves to playing empowered characters, we miss a chance to empathize with people who are in tough spots. One Steam review of this game comes to mind.
My main gripe, and the reason I gave up though, is the pacing of the game. As I mentioned above, I got injured and now I have a limp leg. Movement speed wasn't anything to brag about when I was walking full speed, but now it's just atrocious. And there was this bland, winding path I had to take, and it would take about a minute just limping in a single direction on the path, which is, as you might imagine, super interesting. So I gave up. I'd rather have quality than quantity, and if you're trying to increase the length of your game, this is definitely not the way to go.
Look, this game isn't for everyone, and that's fine. I can 100% understand how this would bore someone to tears. But holy shit, dude. Conway walks with a limp for maybe 2 hours of the game, and even that's too much. Is the idea of inhabiting a disabled body that unbearable? I resent the idea that a slow character can only be slow to pad out the playtime. It feels like a refusal to engage with the game on its own level. Every step with Conway felt intentional, heavy. It did test my patience at times, but mostly it made me think carefully about where I was going, knowing it might take some time to come back. That's an experience you can't convey without disempowering the player at least a little bit. Name me an action game that does spoon theory, you know? No, I'm serious, do it, it's great for engagement. I think we're used to only seeking out games as escapism, and I think we lose out on some cool experiences by doing that. Escapism can be wonderful, don't get me wrong, but it's not always the right fit. There, I wonder if we might use slowness, weakness, frustration to great effect. If you meet this game where it's at, it'll offer you a rare catharsis. It sees what's wrong with all this with stunning clarity. The way capitalism takes people and grinds them down to the bone. It expanded my understanding of the world in a way I most associate with reading leftist theory. I didn't know games could do this. Where many games invoke radical aesthetics for the coolness factor while ultimately believing in very little, Kentucky Route Zero is so deep and nuanced you can read it as a manifesto. I'm glad this game treats its subject matter with such gravity. Every detail is fleshed out with the utmost care, like it wants you to know just how much is under threat of disappearing. This game grieves its world in every moment, offering a new condolence for every inch. It's odd, grieving a thing that's technically still around. Sure, things aren't doing so hot, but America looks about the same. Shops and forests and infinite highways. The people are tired and the infrastructure is crumbling, but everyone keeps things running as best they can. Still, I can't help but feel something intangible has been lost. People are in a constant state of leaving, and hope of belonging anywhere has died out. Instead of the prosperity and freedom we've been promised, the social structure feels hostile to human needs, like it's trying to force us out. And again, that low moan permeating this world, rumbling its walls. We're hearing the society's agonal breaths, those last few breaths a body takes as it loses hope of survival. They sound shallow and dull, somewhere between snoring and choking. The untrained ear might take them as a sign of life, but they're just a reflex, a last-ditch attempt to get oxygen into the lungs. The pulse is gone and the organs are shutting down, but the body breathes on, because that's what bodies do. This place doesn't know it's dead, either. People keep going into work, making small talk, buying knickknacks. For a failed state, it seems pretty functional. True to life, people cling to whatever helps them pretend they aren't living in a dystopia. A church bursts with music that, upon further inspection, comes from a cassette tape being played on loop. The building is empty but hopes to look otherwise. A phone operator loses his job but commutes to the phone exchange every day anyway, just to stand around. It's its own form of remembrance, acting out the way things were in gentler times, letting normalcy live on only in some small way. I see all these people, with their homes destroyed and their families torn apart, and I have to wonder, why the hell are we still doing this? Why do we pour everything into making this dying world seem alive? The truth is, I think it's a reflex. It's what the collective human organism knows, like those last few gasps, our body supplying blood to its cancer. Capitalism trudges on as long as it can, not because anyone thinks it's working anymore, but because it's so deeply entrenched, any alternatives seem impossible. Some people interpret this as capitalism being sustainable, but only at the cost of everything else. Capitalism craves endless growth in a finite world, an unavoidably destructive goal. In order to maintain itself, it must squeeze every last drop of productivity out of people and our planet, asking more and more of us and offering less and less in return. It's unpleasant and cumbersome and just not what we're built for. This is made abundantly clear at the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces. The Bureau is an agency tasked with taking existing buildings, displacing their residents, and repurposing them for new groups. The necessity of such an office to begin with suggests that this world is outgrowing itself. With too few buildings still intact, citizens are left fighting over scraps. It's a given that there will only be less and less space for humans as time goes on, so the need for displacement can only grow. When the Bureau's operations outgrew its office, it overtook an old cathedral, building around it with brick and steel, displacing the church's still active congregation. The congregation was offered a new reclaimed space in turn, a single storage locker. As you can imagine, attendance dried up pretty fast. Such is the price of growth. Except the cathedral still isn't big enough for the Bureau. In the new space, things are cramped with file boxes A through F piled to the ceiling and boxes G through Z stored off-site. The clerks are so overwhelmed with work that the office has been set up haphazardly without considering what it's like to use the space. As a result, even if the information you need is here, it's functionally impossible for a human being to navigate. The process is tangled and infuriating. You're told to ask for Lula on the 5th floor. When you get there, you're told Lula is actually on the 1st floor. Back down on the 1st floor, you ask for Lula, and you're told you need a case number to speak to her, and for a case number, you can ask Clerk Medstein. When you ask Clerk Medstein, she tells you you need an ingestion card, which you can get from Clerk Boehm. When you ask Clerk Boehm, he tells you he's all out of ingestion cards, but you can put in a request for one with Clerk McMillan. To give you an ingestion card, Clerk McMillan needs to fill out a requisition form, which you can get from Clerk Medstein, right back where we started. You can repeat the cycle literally until the end of time and get nowhere. This is not what an efficient system looks like. It doesn't work for Shannon and Conway, it doesn't work for the people it displaces, and it doesn't work for the staff. But unconditional growth means blind growth, concerned only with the next step forwards, no matter what mess it may create, because expansion is the only way to secure its future. You know what it is? It's fucking tumor logic, willing to grow at all costs, up to and including killing its host. No amount of space can contain something that must grow forever. Here I'll offer another spoiler warning, this time for the end of Act 3. A gut-wrenching knife twist of a scene, but one too important to ignore. If you want to skip it, you can go to the timestamp currently on screen. Ready? Okay. To ensure endless growth, capital demands that we consume more than just space and time.
When there's nothing left to burn, you have to set yourself on fire.
In Kentucky Route Zero, capitalism has gone mask off, launching itself into full-on annihilation of human bodies. This is how evil behaves once it's given up any pretense of fairness. This is on display most clearly at the Hard Times Distillery, an underground compound staffed by these guys. The distillery makes whiskey, but its real business is in debt. It purchases people's debt en masse and expects them to pay it down by picking up shifts, working IT, quality testing, making deliveries, and so on. The catch is that all these debts have extremely high interest rates, compounding daily, which makes it nearly impossible for workers to pay them off. So the staff work for years or decades at a task that will never be done, and they essentially pay to do so. Some move into the warehouse to cut down on their commute, detaching them from humanness even further. Over time, the debt eats away at their bodies, leaving nothing but neon-glowing skeletons behind. You have to imagine the management is pretty happy with this arrangement. They've ensured an endless supply of perfect workers who move and speak like humans, but whose inner lives have been emptied out to make room for profit. Mimi, a researcher along the Echo River, puts it well.
I just get this awful feeling when I see them. Like I knew them once, but not anymore. Like when they make up a dead person to look like an old photograph of themselves.
Debt is one way the distillery makes money. The other? Digging dead bodies out of the ground and turning them into whiskey. God, the moment I realized this, I was almost sick to my stomach. The whiskey we've watched people drink through this whole game is made from people. Presumably they do this because corpses are abundant and grave robbing is free. You take savings where you can find them, I guess. It's an absurd, grotesque horror. The kind people whisper about above ground but can't bring themselves to believe. In the last stage of capitalism, as resources run out and the rate of profit plummets, human sacrifice becomes unavoidable. Nothing else can sustain it. That example is a graphic extreme, but it's echoed elsewhere in the game. The Consolidated Power Company's neglect led to the flooding of the Elkhorn coal mine, killing 28 people, including Shannon's parents. The mine later collapsed, with Conway inside, crushing his leg, the costly treatment for which first buried him in debt. From the perspective of the owning class, injury and death are wins. It means new avenues to sell to us, caskets, funerals, medical bills. To them, human life is a resource, only valuable when it can be extracted. But when you make a place unlivable, human bodies stop being a renewable resource. When a family and a roof become luxury, people stop having kids and move away. The economic system has siphoned off value so recklessly, it's left with nothing to feed on. You have to wonder who all this serves. The hegemony of Kentucky Route Zero is as faceless as one can get. No politicians or CEOs are ever mentioned. No wealthy neighborhoods are found on the map. The wealthy wrecked this world and then seemingly moved out, leaving the masses to self-regulate. With businesses and institutions crumbling, it seems like free market capitalism might be in a position to simply erode away. Other than debt enforcers, there's really nothing holding the system in place, no government or law enforcement to speak of. This might offer a glimmer of hope. These are surprisingly good conditions to build something new. Many of the game's characters find liberation in structureless lives, basically living outside the economy. Since the system is blind to individuals, it's not impossible to slip under the radar. In Act 5, we come across a community who gave this a shot. Once a company town run by Consolidated Power, when the company pulled out, people decided to stick around anyway and see what they could build. They erected new houses, sturdier than the ones Consolidated Power put up. They grow their own food, run a local library and TV station. They create a political structure, organize something closer to an actual democracy. And it's not perfect, not by a long shot. The residents' aspirations are still bound by the society they came from, preoccupied with individual power, prone to petty infighting. The broken culture that created them still lingers. If we carry our pasts with us forever, there's no such thing as starting from scratch. But the town, at least for a moment, holds. People live actual lives here, with homes and lasting friendships. They're offered a chance to steer their own lives, to stick around or leave as they please. They even get leisure time, something unthinkable previously. When you're not constantly being forced out of places, you can carry more with you than just your memories. The idea of a shared history with tangible, knowable truths actually becomes possible. It won't last forever. No society can. But knowing we could have this, even for one moment, we have to try, don't we? I mean, what else is there? I won't spoil the ending. It's unexpected and breathtaking, and you should just see it for yourself if you haven't. What I can tell you is the game doesn't end on a positive note. The developers described it as a tragedy, and I can't argue with that. When you surface in the town, battered and filthy, grief suspended in your lungs, none of that disappears. You're still haunted by your past, and you always will be. It is, though, a little easier to breathe here. After a long night underground, surrounded by decay, I'm so glad we got to see this place, where people's choices matter, where their loved ones are remembered, where a better world really does seem possible. Because if there's one thing that Kentucky Route Zero believes, it's that people deserve better than this. People deserve community. They deserve compassion and abundance and room to grow. It's still the most devastating game I've ever played, but only because it's perfectly in tune with just how much we've lost and just how much is left to fight for. If you like this video, good news! I have another one coming out soon. It's about one of my favorite levels in Kentucky Route Zero, the Bat Sanctuary, and it'll be available on my Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you can support me on Patreon, gaining sneak peeks to upcoming videos and bonus videos you won't find anywhere else. I want to thank all my friends who sent in voiceover for this video, and also my dad for the research help. You'll find their socials and channels linked below, alongside a playlist of music that inspired this episode. The music in this episode came from a few albums I highly recommend. I'm literally addicted to getting copyright claimed. I will never learn. One last bit of housekeeping. We might hit 20,000 subscribers this summer, which is very cool, and I'd love to do a Q&A to commemorate the occasion. So if you have any questions for me, just leave them in the description below. I will do my best to get to them. And finally, I want to thank my sweet, beloved patrons: Alejandro Hernandez, Alice Hayes, Ami Palady, Anastasia Wolf, Ari Renan-Tell, Ariel Goodbody, Basil Bennett Levy, Celeste Blossom, Charlie H., Cherie Monjovi, Christopher Stilson, Connor Q, Darla Butler, Detective Meow Meow, Dr. Haley Isabella Colley, Jen Pseudonym, Jean, Guillaume, Gwen Lothman, Hannah Leishnitz, Imogen Campbell, Imogen Waters, Izzy, Ivy, Jacob, Jasperi Wertanen, Joe Azar, June, Caitlin, Kieran McMullen, Lee Slothpope, Lillian Butler, Linda Jewers, Madeline Mausoleum, Mariah, Mary Wishart, Maddie Mahmood, Mel Cat. God, I'm sweaty, eh? Yeah, it had to turn the fan off. It's really hot in here. Pascal, Quillworth, Rebecca Gale, Ricka Coy, Ruby Landau Pickus, Sam Braley, Sarah C., Scatterflower, Scott Murray, Smaz V., Taylor Hardy, The Recognition Scene, Tracy Sim, Vivi, Wimble Imble, and Aren. This would not have been possible without you guys. Thank you.